Okay, welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Rob Steele, your host, and joining me today is Kat Jordan, Chief of Staff at Crystal Venture Partners. Welcome to the show, Kat. How are you doing?
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. I know, we've been talking about, chatting about some chief of staff stuff for a while. So really excited to, jump into some of the questions. And yeah.
Yeah, it's great to finally have you on the podcast and get stuck in. It's going to be good. So let's start off with a little bit of background. You've had quite a trajectory, moving from business development to investor relations, and now into a chief of staff role at a VC firm. Can you walk us through the pivotal moments in your career that led you to where you are and the sort of skills that you developed along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to explain that, I'm gonna just mention a recent, like a conversation I had yesterday with someone who has been, career tech, but has transitioned to making a lifetime of being a chief of staff. And, she asked me the question, how did you get into VC? And I was like, it was completely an accident. She laughed and she goes, me too. And, I wanted to chat with her because obviously I'm a quarter into my chief of staff role. I've always wanted to be a chief of staff. I think, the chief of staff is several things. People will say, you're a Swiss Army knife, you're wearing multiple hats, and it's quite literally that. And I think I've always seen that in myself, and I think others have seen that in me, but it's really about the right opportunity, the right time, and like the right team. So I think for me, I'm going on a little bit over 2 years working in venture. I have been a quarter into my chief of staff role at Crystal Venture Partners, but when I think about pivotal moments, I think the foundation of chief of staffs and venture specifically is kind of like what am I bringing to the table, or what is that person bringing to the table to their team, and what's unique about them, and what does that background look like? And for me, it really is investor relations. Investor relations can mean a lot of things, especially on the institutional capacity in VC. But investor relations is something that I fell into accidentally. Technically, my second gig out of undergrad, I majored in entrepreneurship. I have a background in family business, so that's really the foundation of why would I go and work for companies that aren't even producing revenue, or why would I be part of a team that's writing, high conviction checks for people whose businesses don't even have a name. So I think like that mentality, and has kind of been in the back of my head, like I want to be a part of, things like that are a little bit riskier and apply my skill sets to those teams. So I think my technically second gig out of school was a fintech startup, so that was pivotal in the way that I, joined a sales team, a really old school Wall Street sales team selling a financial product with a blockchain component. And, within 2.5 years, I was, an assistant vice president of investor relations. And what that really meant was handling high net worth individuals and being a key partner to the strategic VCs that invested in us. And so then that, kind of took me to becoming a principal of investor relations at Lead Venture Partners, Lead VC, and they focused on sports and health technology outside of, more of a passion area. I was, a ski racer in college, and I obviously, being an athlete myself and really admiring, not only consumer health and sports related, products and missions, I really resonated with, the mission of the athlete investor, especially the female athlete investor. So spending time there and really focusing on that mission was amazing. And then when a chief of staff opportunity came across my desk here in Manhattan, where I'm based, I was like, this is kind of the time to make that move and, kind of round out every other skill set that I have not had a chance to, right? Like
Yeah.
like operations, a little bit more of the investment side. There's things that my background in like previous roles kind of, I won't say like siloed me, but it was like, hey, you're really great at fundraising or relationship management. And I am. And so it was one of those things where it's like, this is my moment if I want to make a career in VC or maybe a career of chief of staff, whatever that is. I really need to sharpen the rest of those tools.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you think it was, in terms of that you developed over those previous experiences, the sort of skills or traits? Was it curiosity? Was it adaptability? Was it communications? Or, working with a wide variety of individuals that you were able to influence? What were the things, the capabilities that you were developing at that time that were now useful for you going into the chief of staff role?
Yeah, I think that, that's actually a great question. And like one of the things I do often is, obviously networking with other chief chief of staffs. The sidebar to that is to get my role, I had to do a very thorough case study as I should have. And one of the things I kind of learned is when people say that you're really kind of running your own lane and specifically to be a chief of staff at, a venture firm like mine where like we are on fund one, we are quite literally building a business. So, I like to think of the analogy of, hey, we're building a house, and here is quite literally the studs of the house. And, you know, prior to this moment, we were like, "Hey, we have this house. We've thrown a couch. We're eating some pizza." But and like everyone wants to hang out with us and do business, but like now we have to put those hardwood floors that won't need much attention for 15, 20 years. Now we're kind of doing some of those things. So I think when I look back at my roles, and how I've, grown to this point in my life so quickly, I've really been able to run my own lane and kind of take on responsibility in, like, ambiguous ways, and I think, that's something where I think the most impactful thing for me has just honestly been finding really, really smart people and, coming to them and asking, you say like, "Hey, my instincts and like, I can bring this to the table, but like I have this to learn from you." And when I made this switch to Crystal Venture Partners, I have I'm like, I need to work with people who are constantly, um, you know, keeping me curious and learning new things. And when you look at like my background, for example, it's like financial technology, sports and health technology, insurance technology. That's what I'm focused on right now. The underlying thing is for me, it's like I've had to stay curious. I've had to say like there's a lot of opportunities, but where is the highest growth potential in these opportunities for me? And, what can I learn from that, right? I never expected to learn so much about blockchain when I was at, the company I was at. I never expected to learn so much about, consumer health and now insurance, which is a very complicated world, by the way. I'm glad that this, I won't be, tested on any of that yet because I have executives with like, 20 plus years on my team who, um, are really I'm learning something from them. So I think anytime that I know that there's opportunity for myself to grow and for me to be a part of something that kind of hasn't been done before, right? Like like right now, like being a chief of staff at a specialized investment fund, we are taking an approach to an industry at an early stage that hasn't been done in that way. And I think that is what kind of is like that like theme through even, you know, chief of staff related, but also just like what gets me out of bed in the morning is being able to be a part of things like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's clear that you get your energy from building and developing and growing, right? And that stems from your natural curiosity, I think. I think it's clear. Well, it seems clear to me that the chief of staff role in venture capital isn't a standardized role. It depends on the stage of the fund or the VC. From your perspective, what does a chief of staff? What is the remit of the chief of staff role at your company? What does that look like on a sort of day-to-day or a week-to-week basis?
It's a really great question. I did a lot of field research stepping into this role. It actually has been, I won't say the most, but one of the most helpful things my team could have set me up for in terms of, preparation and onboarding. in several ways. One, kind of creating my own network, right? Because these chief of staff roles at venture funds, you are a high impact individual kind of on your own island. And you may or may not have tackled some of the high impact tasks that you need to accomplish. And so leading into the role, like being able to speak to others and say what do you do day to day?
Yeah.
And that really is dependent on actually their team's skill sets. And it also, when it's most effective, is dependent on that open line of communication between, your principal, your managing partner, and yourself, and saying, like my background really is, relationship management and um, telling stories. When I was doing investor relations for venture, I used to say that like I was a storyteller, right? We are painting a picture of a portfolio and really, we're kind of selling a concept here that like we've made the right bets. And that's kind of hard to do. But so like when I think about that relationship, I know where my wheelhouse is, and I know that I need to take things onto my plate that are outside that wheelhouse. And so I think it's really about mapping that out and bringing in the best resources to do that. And the best way to do that has actually been going to my peers that are other chief of staffs in venture, because I fostered those relationships. That's my relationship management is my background. And really just saying to them, I need to tackle XYZ task, and then several individuals will hop in and say, I'm currently facing that problem. I just solved that problem, or I'm going to have to solve that problem next quarter. And what's really interesting about that is some of us, it's not that we don't have it figured out, but I like to look at this chief of staff role in venture as like there's a different priority every day. And
Yeah.
it's say that that's, it's because things are so like influxing in a crazy way. It's just like, no, that's just how things are when you're running a fund, and like there's different needs of the business, and so different things are pulling you in different directions. So it's really helpful to have, that community and people who, I think I'm obviously I'm, here I think I'm very smart, but at the same time I can be like, I have no idea how to solve that. And, it's really helpful, just like anything, to really have close peers that are like, yeah,
Yeah.
like I've done that. I can like assist with that. So
Yeah, I think it's clear that community and relationships are important for you, right? Beyond the sort of tactical problem solving, you've got X, Y, Z to solve or deliver against. What are some of the other sort of benefits you would anticipate, as you build out that chief of staff community or network, and that sort of across different firms within the community?
yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, I find it tying back towards everyone's personal career growth. I mentioned before that everyone's kind of had a foundation before stepping into these chief of staff roles. Everyone has a different reason for why they've wanted to take a role like this. And everyone, kind of like it's almost like that cliche interview question. Where do you want to be in 5 years or 10 years, right? And so I think anyone who's taking on a role such as this, their answer to that is going to be probably high expectations for themselves. And so I think the benefit of, curating a community, such as, I've naturally done it through the case study. I quite literally was given the case study, and I'm, sales background. I went to every chief of staff and venture I could find on LinkedIn. I was on calls, like probably 20 calls within the next 48 hours. And the one thing I learned is I was blown away. Exceptionally intelligent individuals that somehow, like, kind of found themselves on their own island because of the nature of it's like that high pressure. Like, there's a lot I have to do. I can do it. I, top down, like, I can tackle this. I can report at that high level. But I think like about building the community for me is like we will kind of do all means necessary for the business, for our roles. But I think it's more personal. Like when I create this community, I kind of want to say like, hey, in 5, 10 years, if I want to start my own thing, like who am I going to found that with, right? Like, and I think of this community as individuals that are as, curious, high powered, um, and probably want to stay in BC for some time, and or be like kind of grow that chief of staff role. And so that's what I think, like the benefit is kind of just getting a bunch of smart people together in a room. And we've done several, like here in New York, several dinners, several informal conversations, and I've learned a surprising amount that's kind of related to, let's just say, like just in interpersonal stuff, and really connecting with people on, like, everyone has different pain points with this role. And I think what's been helpful is that, like, hey, you're not alone with, XYZ pain point, but also my eyes have been open to, oh wow, I didn't even think, like, I'm kind of good at that, right? Like, I was speaking to someone and they were saying, I have to put together a lot of decks for a lot of investors, and like that's not my background. Like, I was like, oh, I have a great designer, and like I was able to refer them. I'm like, yeah, and like if you want me to help you, like in that way, right? So it's like kind of just more of leveling and being able to help and grow together.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And on that topic of, I guess, of learning, AI is the hottest topic right now, and I think we're all having to do a lot of learning around this subject, seeing how we can best leverage it within our context, right? I guess especially in VC land, right? AI is very hot, right? It's where the money is going. How are you approaching it, in your company? Can you share any specific examples of how you're currently or thinking about leveraging AI? And what does the process look like to identify areas where AI could genuinely be useful?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I think of, as a firm, we like to share, not only like research on AI, but kind of just like thought pieces in general. And like, we recently were, talking internally and shared, a quote, and I thought it was so interesting, where it's like we are going to use AI from an infrastructure perspective to get more work done, not the same amount of work, right? And it's not to replace people in the way that, like, I think it's kind of been a theme in like the media and people talking. Like, I during New York Tech Week, I went to a chief of staff event that was purely the AI toolkit for chief of staffs. And, we're talking about, will AI ever replace us, right? Us being the chief of staffs. And it's like the reality is no, we need to adapt as chief of staffs to implement the right tools and automation to produce higher level work and keep up with, AI that might be touching like the outside organization. We are, AI investors first and foremost within the insurance and technology sectors. I am coming back to this case study, and like, because I did field research, and part of when I got chief of staffs on the phone, I was like, how are you using AI? And I won't say who I spoke to, but the deduction quite literally was, we don't have a strategy. So between firms that might be, not investing in anything tech or AI related to that being a core thesis internally, there wasn't really an approach. And so my takeaway from that and going back to my team was, we as investors, not only as investors that invest in AI, like we need to have an approach to this, and that's actually coming from a higher level too, with my investment team, and they want to be able to automate certain things, such as, our our deal flow, our investment memos. We want to be able to work, as I said, um at like a higher threshold versus like the same amount. And I think with the chief of staff role, there is a lot of communications back and forth. There's a lot of like human error related to what is sitting on our desks. And so right now, in this downtime of the summer, right, post a fundraise, my team is kind of, looking to me, and I'm, sitting down with people who have built, things in-house to looking at different tools. I think when I was at this chief of staff event during Tech Week, it was, what's everyone using as an AI note taker? And everyone was fawning over Granola. And I was like, why are we not using Granola? Now my team's obsessed with it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's just a little, but it's like that balance of like not adding too much to the tech stack, but finding the best version of accomplishing of what you need to accomplish, right? And
Yeah.
so, we're doing a lot of comms, a lot of notes, a lot of process flows related to deals, related to quarterly updates, like whatever it is. And as I'm looking, I'm like, there's a lot of great stuff on the market, and I'm not really sure what's going to work for us yet. It's going to be different, like between me to another chief of staff at a different fund, or even a chief of staff at a startup. But I want to have like strong opinions. And so right now, like about how we will operate best. And so right now I'm kind of in this wormhole, and I want to be able to make those recommendations to my team, because I know that if I'm able to accomplish that, the output of myself and, the team, it's just gonna be, if we can solve that on like that cadence, it's gonna be great. But like I said, when I spoke to a lot of people, they were like, "We're in a Google sheet." I'm like, "That's I'm like, what? Like, how? That's not automation." So, I like, it was one of those things where I'm like, "All right, I think we're doing pretty okay." But
Yeah.
it's I'm building my own. This probably is too much information, but I'm basically building my own me but AI version for my team,
Yeah.
and like asking like it like asking it to solve tasks that I need to. And what has been proven is you're always going to need that human look over, because it's not perfect yet, but it gets you, let's just say, 80% of the way, and that's
Yeah.
going to me time. So
That's cool. How are you building that out? And I also love Granola, by the way. I think it's a fantastic team. It's a London-based team. So yeah, an awesome bit of technology. But the other thing I was going to mention as well, alongside Granola, I've also had huge productivity gains from WhisperFlow. So it's like a dictation tool. So wherever you've got essentially like a text box, be it on LinkedIn, email, or if you're writing an investment memo or blog article or what, you just press the function key and you just put your thoughts down. And it's so natural. It gets your tone of voice, it gets everything. It is a massive productivity sort of gain.
ooh, I've said that, now I'm like, that's like going to be my new wormhole for today.
I'll send you the link after.
You absolutely need to. And now I'm like, wait, so what, could you go back to the question? You got me distracted. Wait, how does that work? How can I use that?
The question was around how are you building out the virtual cat Jordan chief of staff to get to it, to be able to answer 8% of those questions or whatever that your team might ask you.
I think that's a really great question. You know, and it comes back to that mentality of not adding like too many tools need necessary. So to answer your question, I have to take a step back and look at like our current tech stack, and like what tech stack I'm using day to day, right? And so a lot of those things for me primarily are, email, CRM, and probably like our audio note dictation, right? And so I like right now what I'm trying to do is say, okay, if I'm using Perplexity, if I'm using ChatGPT, a lot of those tools are great for a lot of things. Research, there's a lot of times that chief of staffs on a dime, like we need to learn a lot about an area or department or whatever it may be, on just on the fly. And so like Perplexity is great for that. Perplexity is great for understanding what's going to be relevant to me and my firm, because I've, taught it, like, this is what we do. This is, the sources that we should be sourcing, academic sources, for whatever research purposes. ChatGPT, I'm like, everyone, it's kind of cliche. Everyone's like, ChatGPT is my best friend. Right now, I'm trying, outside of like automating between email to CRM to different functions of the business, trying to build the best version of my virtual self in ChatGPT, and it's also learning about my teammates and our work styles as well, right? Like there's times where I'm drafting communications and I'm like, this communication has to sound like, and I'm giving it email examples. It has to sound like us, right? And so it's learning a lot. So like the the cliche answer is going to be ChatGPT. But I think what like keeps me up at night and like what I'm kind of like putting a lot of pressure on myself is like how does it all work together, right? Like how are we reducing the manual input in like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Granola, CRM, like we're using Affinity. Like those are all great platforms. Everyone's taking a different approach to automation, but right now what I'm trying to solve is how like we're kind of like aggregating that. So whether it'll be something custom for us or, a workflow that works for us, I think that's going to be more of the case because we're also like, we're a lean team. We take a lot of pride in that. And so I think to turn to AI and anything automation comes from us not wanting to take away from some of that character as well, right? Like we want to keep some of that personal style, some of that like not too much chat GBT talk, but we really need to say like this is what we need to optimize as functions of business for us. And right now I think I'm even getting recommendations from ChatGPT, which is great because now it knows my whole brain dump. So
Yeah.
it's the short answer is it's evolving. And um it's helpful to know that it's top of mind for my other chief of staff, especially in venture, and that like they also are we're kind of looking to each other for like even like the best tools, right? Note taking, email drafting, whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Um, I think there's a lot of gains to be made from an impact or productivity point of view right now, but you've hit the nail on the head. It's how do you string this all together, all the different systems, tools, and for it to be one easy process or workflows for everyone in the team to be able to benefit from. You don't want to be creating, a silo for yourself and, the rest of the business not being able to access it. You mentioned something earlier when you went to, I think it was a tech week in New York, and you had a meetup about AI. And will AI replace the chief of staff role? And the outcome seemed to be no. Um, why was that? Why do you not think, given all these tools and how much they can automate and make people more productive, why will they not get rid of the chief of staff role? What's your perspective, and also what was the perspective with the other people in that room?
Absolutely. And I think listen, I think that and I think it's funny. Like I think I also see like new like first of all, one of the topics of discussion is that like is the chief of staff role like a fad? Like there's been a high uptick, whether it's in venture or at startups of this role. And people don't really understand it. We know that like it's different in every place. But related to the AI topic, right? y- The need, I think it comes back to like the need of a chief of staff. And the need of a chief of staff, yes, it's someone who can help, their CEO or their principal operate at a higher capacity, right? But I think there's such a like a human element to that will never go away. And I think the sentiment of the other chief staffs were like, yes, I could probably be replaced by an email drafter, right? Or I could probably be replaced by like a scheduling time management tool. But the reality is there is not one tool that does all of those things and that like talks to all of to each other perfectly. And I think there's a lot of there's a it, we were sharing the sentiment that it brings you 95% of the way. like an email draft or like optimizing a schedule or whatever it may be. However, there are outside factors that like aren't like, like even like I think about like we have offline, right? As a team, like there are things happening in a business that aren't being picked up and being generated through, and those contextual details are very important. And so the sentiment of us, communicating that and like having that conversation was you can replace functions of us, but you can't replace the like the almost like the sentiment, right? Your CEO, your managing partner hired you to even like be a soundboard, right? Remind you of some of those intangibles, whether it's related to planning or making decisions. So I think it really comes down to more of like that human element, right? Like you have high powered humans running these funds or running these businesses, and these tools can get them, a certain part of the way. But like, what if the tools break, right? Then like, like they are tools and they are taking information at a certain perspective, but sometimes you really need some of that human element. And so I think that's kind of where we all stand on that and come from is like there's a part of our impact that's a little bit intangible that you can't replace.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I think it's a lot of the empathy, the judgment, and the sense making that is required to amplify your principle. Those type of things, I don't think you can ever replace with
Yeah.
technology.
My managing partner, his name is Jonathan. He went viral on a LinkedIn post fighting with his chat GPT because of like the M dashes.
All right. Yeah.
He's gonna he's gonna be like, "Oh, you were talking about this on the podcast." But it was funny because, that I think that's for everyone now, like that's like an indicator that you've used, ChatGPT, and he was like, "No more M dashes." And it just kept using them, and I was like, "See?" I like joked with him. I was like, "I'm more obedient than ChatGPT. I'm never gonna use the M dashes."
Never promise. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I think some of the technology, even the tools that we like to use the best, like granola, I'm not gonna say anything bad about granola, but they're not perfect, and neither are us, right? They're there to supplement the human error for sure, but yeah, it's not a perfect solution.
Exactly. So, Kat, have you got any advice for other potential chiefs of staff who are looking to get into venture or into the chief of staff role? How do you position yourself? What sort of skills or experiences should they be looking at to potentially, move into that role? That would be, I think, useful information for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. For myself personally, I think, and the advice I would give to someone who's, considering it or maybe even more dead set is you need to ask yourself why. Like, why are you going to take on this role? And for me, the answer to why was, you know, I felt like I would find more value in personal growth, touching every aspect of the business. And sometimes you could think that that would be impactful for you and it might not be the case, right? I think like for me, it was, I see this in myself and then validating that with like other mentors who knew me really well. And they're like, yes, you would be perfect for that. And it's one of those things, where like you have to, I went to like more seasoned mentors and I was like, I want to do this. And they were like, yeah, I think you would be great at that because, you are looking to learn these things. I think the advice in like actually obtaining the role is you have to be highly specific. If it's venture, if it's a startup, you need to, and I think this is just my brain. I think about everything like a sales process. You're always selling yourself, and you're telling that story. And for me, when I got the chief of staff gig at Crystal Venture Partners, I sold to them. I was like, I'm an expert and supplementary to this team, right? And that was purely explicit in the job description. And I know nothing about insurance, but I want to be an operator, and I want to expand on these skill sets. So I think it's also going to be about the fit too. And I think the best advice I would give to someone is if they're really interested in like CPG, right? They need to be looking at um startups that could be ready for that next state, like that next like chief of staff stage, and like sell yourself. You need to, it's like less about like becoming a chief of staff anywhere and more about like why you and this team or this industry or this role. And it has to, I think it truly has to be that specific and like that perfect like you're pitching yourself in the needs of that business or firm. And I truly found to be the case for myself and, others as well. And that's the advice I would give to anyone, because some people are like, that a job like that sounds really cool. I'm like, yeah, but it's not going to be cool if, the team doesn't complement what you bring to the table. It's not going to be, it's not going to be worth your personal growth if it's not the right industry or stage. And stages, it could be the stage of the startup or the stage of like the fund. In my case, I went to this chief of staff networking that had current chiefs of staffs and perspectives, and I was sitting next to an incredible woman. She's like, I'm going to be a chief of staff at like a series B startup, and this is why. And I was like, I have no doubt that you won't get there, because she knew what it meant, right? She knew what that meant. And I think it's more about figuring out what it means for you at that, like, that other fit of the puzzle.
Yeah.
That's the advice I would give.
Yeah, I love your perspective on looking at his sort of sales process, doing discovery, qualification, and driving it forward, right? Really selling yourself throughout the process and the value that you would add and complement or amplify within the team you're going to be working with.
And I was inspired by someone at Tech Week that, like, sold themselves when there wasn't a job description. Some of these roles aren't on market. Some people don't know that they need you till they need you. So I would encourage that as well.
It's
Don't
great. There's dev skills there.
go too rogue, but, like, sell yourself. um to someone who doesn't even know that they need you yet, right? And because at the end of the day, the main purpose of a chief of staff is to make the executives that you support, like, to make their lives easier. And if you can be that in a very specific way, that's the mission.
That sounds cool. This has been a fantastic conversation, Kat. I've loved your insights. I can't believe it's only just over a quarter that you've been in role as a chief of staff. Thank you so much for sharing all your experiences and insights that you've gathered to date with the listeners. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode. And join us next time for more in-depth discussions with leading chiefs of staff, just like Kat. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Kat.
much.